All right, we're back at it on the Success Flow podcast. And as we do, we're trying to relay a lot of the things that we are learning, working on in real time, and pass that forward. That is the goal of this podcast. So the fact that you and I sat through a really educational session yesterday with hopefully a guy that's going to be on the podcast. It's looking that way. Jan, if you're listening to this, this is your invite. But really good speech yesterday by Jan Rutherford, who is an executive coach, a former Green Beret, wrote a book called The Littlest Green Beret, because though this man is mighty in stature, emotionally and from a leadership perspective, his physical frame is small. He was the smallest Green Beret to get through, and it was just a really impactful session. And we thought it would be helpful to pass along our takeaways from this and kind of break it down on the Success Flow pod. So, Stephen, what were your initial feedback on the session with Jan yesterday?
Yeah, I loved it. It was great to meet Jan. He's, bringing the different perspective. Honestly, I was pleasantly surprised. I didn't know much of what we were getting ourselves into. And, I think we've had other mindset or business coaches come through, and sometimes there's a heavy sale at the end and like, hey, let's work together kind of thing. And we never got that from Jan. He just was very genuine, just wanted to share his stories. Most of the presentation, if you want to call it that, was sharing his stories. And one of the biggest ones was, his time as a Green Beret, and, talking about when he was wanting to play football and different sports and different things like that. And, when he was younger and couldn't make weight. And, I just thought that was the adversity that he faced. One of the words that kind of rang throughout the entire presentation was, we all hit adversity, right? We could do a whole podcast episode on adversity and talking about self-reliant leadership. How do you have that resilience to get through tough times? And, that was kind of the theme of yesterday's session. And, as leaders and that we try to be in leading a group of people, whether you're a business owner or leading a team and professionally, or maybe it's just leading your family, it was a ton of nuggets that I was able to take back, and I'm excited to break them down on the pod and, see what we can share, some wisdom that we picked up from good old Jan. And hopefully he does hop on this podcast. He'd be a great guest.
We're putting it into the universe, willing it to be. But I agree with your summing it up in a nutshell, that really the theme was around adversity and leadership. And I think this was with our Gento men's group. And I think that's been a theme in the room and the beauty of that room is sharing the adversity we're going through. And hopefully someone else is going through the same thing, or it's going to open up some blind spots that may be approaching, bumps in the road that might be in the future, but getting ahead of them. And I think, that really was the theme, though he encompassed a lot. And I thought it was going to be, just given the book, my preconceived thoughts were it was going to be more military based than it was. And he didn't go too hard on that, even though I love it. I love reading about the military. I think applying it to our lives is really helpful in certain circumstances, but he just did a really great job and learned a lot. I know that, that and the listeners at this point know that the coaching space is important to me. I'm coaching a handful of people, kind of rotating because of the impact coaching has had on me. So every time we get one of those folks in the room, I'm always looking a little even more extra intently at them on how they operate and kind of around their process and presence. So I think that one of the ways I wanted to kick off that he mentioned that I brought up a few podcasts ago, which was an overlap from the Founders podcast. And one of the continuing themes that David Senra has brought up multiple times with each and every successful founder, the people that are really building big organizations or putting their dent in the universe, is that excellence is the ability to decide how much you're willing to suffer. And it's just a part of life, right? And then second portion of that I have for you is the comparison between necessary suffering and unnecessary suffering. If we can eliminate the unnecessary suffering that we are creating because of our behaviors or our thinking just stuck in our head, it gives us a lot more space and emotional fortitude to handle the suffering that's just going to come as a part of life. So kicking it over to you there, what are your thoughts there on the suffering portion of Jan's talk?
Yeah, it's like kind of the surrender, suffer. Like I think that's what life is about. Unfortunately, there's always going to be suffering, and you have to have the ability to adapt. And that was a word he used extensively, was having adaptability. And resilient is a great word too, but I think he used the line. It was what was it? If I'm walking outside and it's cold, I'm not asking you to grow fur. I'm just asking you to put on a jacket. So you're not changing who you are. You're just adapting to the environment, and really just being your authentic self, and being adaptable to the situations that come at you. And oftentimes it's just like everything's temporary. All of your failures are temporary. All of your successes are temporary. And it's just figuring out a way to flow through life. And going back to the suffering piece, I think that's where the most pivotal moments happen, is because you have these wake up calls, or you hit these rock bottoms, or you are going through a really tough time. And it's like, how am I going to face this adversity head on and get through this to find the opportunities on the other side? And you end up better afterwards than you were before. And so it's just really, having that perspective and that mindset, which, you and I work on a lot. It's not something that you just are born with. And I think it's a muscle that you have to develop and grow, and just really looking at things in a totally different perspective, as opposed to, this is happening to me, this is happening for me. And he brought up Viktor Frankl from, what's the title?
Man's Search for Meaning.
Yeah. Man's Search for Meaning. Like obviously dealing with the Holocaust and all the things that he was had to suffer through, changed everything upstairs in his mind and his perspective. And that's how he was able to weather the storm. And that's like an extreme case of suffering, but we can use that in our everyday lives when things don't go our way and we're having shitty days or weeks or whatever. Things are not clicking, on firing all cylinders. How do we just focus on what we can control, let it roll off our back, continue pushing forward, and finding ways to get out of our ruts to see the opportunities on the other side, and then going all in on those. And so it's just good reminders. Like it's cool to hear different people's perspectives on similar topics. And the way his stories and like how he told, in the military and the suffering that he went through as being one of the tiniest guys, and, going up against some of the big boys, and, he had to suffer and he had to get through those situations, and he did it. And I thought the coolest thing was, in his mind, he was like 20 years old or something. And he goes, I just thought, for some reason, I thought about my grandkids, my future grandkids, and telling them stories about how I quit. And I was like, I can't let that happen. I can't let that happen. This is how I'm going to persevere, is because I don't want to tell my future grandchildren that I quit because it was too hard. And I thought that was the coolest thing. And that's legacy thinking.
I couldn't agree more. And we talk about our future selves, right? Are we robbing from our future selves, or are we paying them? And that's how a lot of people tie discipline is this decision for my instant gratification of myself now, or am I thinking about that future self? And that's like one of the best definitions of paying my future self, not with money, or not with literally about the identity of, I am not a quitter on something that's this important. So I love that. And I love how you called out the different, when you said resilience versus adaptability. I think that's kind of and we might be pulling straws here, but that's the action portion, right? If you're adaptable, that shows, like, I know your term is pivot. If we're pivoting, we are actually taking action with feedback from something negative or positive that happened, as opposed to just being resilient. Like, I can take
taking it, like being a turtle versus a chameleon.
Yeah. Like, I've got a high pain tolerance, but you could sit there and take the punishment, but likely not going to change your state. The storm might pass, but you have to decide what action you're going to take, which I really feel has become a theme in our podcast as of recent with both guests and just the stuff that we're reading into.
Yeah. And I thought it was neat too. I wanted to talk about the video that he shared. It was about a 5-minute video. He's done 25 excursions, I think he said. And they're like these crucibles that takes ex-military, you take, CEOs or executives. I think Western Union was one of the banks that, had some employees that come do that, but all sorts of types of people that want to go on these crucible, and basically these big, long, hard, challenging hikes. And they're like in the middle of nowhere. Like they're off the grid. They're in the mountains of Utah or Moab or, in Denver, maybe in Colorado. They're all over. And he shared the video and they broke them up into 2 different groups. And, he kind of did like a whole human experiment. And it was one group had the opportunity to choose their leader for each task, and the other group didn't. Like they had to switch the leader or something like that, right? And so the day of one of the biggest hikes, they had to go up, the highest peak. I think it was like 2,000 feet in elevation or something, or whatever. And you had a couple of different ways you could go. And he shared 2 types of leaders. Like there's one who was like an ex. I don't know if he was an ex Green Beret or just
commando.
Commando.
He
right?
kept using the term commando. Yeah.
Yeah, and
he's a badass.
He was absolute badass, and let's fucking go. But his team, the people that were with him, may not have been as physically fit as him, but he was like, guys, we're going to challenge ourselves. We're going to go straight line, boom, straight up the mountain. We're getting there as fast as we can. And then the other guy was, a little bit more, hey guys, we're here to have some fun. The objective was to get up to the top of the mountain and to get there safely. That was it. There was no other objective. There's no pace, no timing of this. And so he was like, we're going to make this nice and fun and we're going to enjoy ourselves. And so they went the long way, right? It's like almost like the hare and the tortoise, in the race, like which you would think that the other guys ended up getting up the mountain at the same time, because the commando who took him up straight line, yeah, he was able to get there, but some of his team members were just like dead, and it was miserable. It was a horrible experience for them. And yeah, they broke through and challenged themselves and found out what they were capable of, but they just did not enjoy it. Whereas everyone else, they went at a snail's pace, but they were like singing and having fun and whatever. And it was just like 2 different leadership styles of, are we going to be hard charging forward, like a bull in a china shop and just get there as fast as we can? Or are we going to take our time, see the obstacles, make sure that everyone on the team is comfortable to continue down the path? And both succeeded, though. There was really no wrong answer, but it was the human experiment of, who was the better leader and who would you rather follow? And I think the consensus was the commando was well fit for the job himself, but not necessarily a good leader for the group.
I found it interesting that we only saw one of the exercises, right? And as they were selecting the leader, the group that was able to select, they kept choosing this guy because he was a commando. And I was drawing so many parallels to in corporate and specifically enterprise sales, how often the best sales guy or girl in regard to quota attainment, they've hit quota a number of times, they wind up in a leadership role, and that backfires. Not always, but it can very often backfire, because just because you can do doesn't mean you can lead. There's a big difference go ahead.
Yeah, no, it's a huge difference. You're 100% right. You've got like a high performer, and they're not focused on anything but themselves. And so they know what they do. They're experts in their field. But now as soon as you become a leader, you've got to develop people. It's not about you anymore. It's about the team, the collective. And you see that, and you hear stories like that all the time. And he actually threw I'll repeat this. He threw a slide up there and just kind of what makes a team. And he gave you seven bullets, and it was, shared responsibility, shared work with solid relationships, team accountability, a distinctive purpose, effective meetings, essentially excellent communication, clear measures, so having defined roles, and real work, exceptional results. And essentially, as a leader, it's like, do your best, do what's right. And I think it's simple, not easy. We talk about it all the time. Having strong communication, clear vision of where you're going, holding the team accountable to what they said they were going to do or what you all had agreed upon, especially if you're having a brainstorm session and you're working on things like, hey, what do you think? Are we all in agreement? This is what we're going to do. And then if someone goes off to the wayside, holding that person accountable and explaining how it makes others feel, or explaining how it brings the team down, or you let them down, or whatever. And he brought up the great point that we hear, kind of like in sports, you're only as good as your weakest link. Your company culture, your team culture is only as good as what you tolerate. And so if you're letting someone kind of get away with some stuff that doesn't support the team's mission, then you all of a sudden start, and you still continue to support them or whatever, or you can't correct that action or that behavior, it all of a sudden others start to follow suit and be like, well, they can get away with it, And so it was just really cool talking about how, and then it's not focused on yourself. Like the commando who was like, well, I'm going to just go do all this myself and you guys follow me.
With the best intention, right? His
totally,
intention
he wasn't
was,
a jerk. It was
this
just
is
what
how
he
I
knew
know
how to
how
do
to
best.
operate. This is what I know. This is,
right.
Yeah. And he's taken action, which is great. But that was the first dot I connected when Jan asked us, how do you show up in adversity? And I think that room with Gento, given the amount of conversations we've had about this, it's not about me. Like this isn't about me. We do have to make sure that our cups are full, that we are taking care of ourselves from the instance that we have the capacity and the energy to show up. But adversity is solved by approaching the problem with, how does this impact everyone else? And I think it solves a lot. I had shared something on Instagram the other day from Naval Ravikant that stated the quickest path to unhappiness is being self-centered. And not only self-centered in the sense of our time in wanting things and the world revolves around me, but just dwelling on our problems or what's important to us now. They might not be once, but just thinking about ourselves all the time and how every action or event in our life is going to impact us. The way to disarm that, and the happiest people are out of that portion of their brain and thinking about how they're impacting others. And it sounds altruistic, but I challenge the listeners to not look at it as, oh, like you're a saint or it's all philanthropy. Just the perspective you're looking at things at being, how does this impact everybody else? It takes that pressure off me, the attention off me, and the energy off draining and swirling in you. And I loved that. I love the way that we all kind of came to, all the feedback was kind of go in that direction. It feels like we're on the right path from a leadership perspective in the room.
I don't have to, I get to type of stuff. Like I don't have to help this client out, and I get to put a smile on their face or ensure that they're a happy customer or whatever. Right. I don't have to support a team member. Like you can't look at it like, oh, I have to do this, I have to do that. No, you get to, because it's an opportunity to make an impact on others. And in turn, it's your own self brand, essentially. What's their perception of you when you go above and beyond for somebody else? They're going to think highly of you. And so, but if you're always having this kind of, I have to do these things as opposed to I get to with various opportunities, it's just a little mindset shift is all it is. And it's putting the oxygen mask on. When he was talking, I just couldn't stop thinking about how you have to have this perspective, especially as leaders. Like you have to practice what you preach, and you have to look at these opportunities to focusing on yourself and your health and your sleep and all the stuff that he brought up. I thought it was interesting how I thought you were about to go down this path, but I don't know if you all the way got there. When we do face adversity in like the situations, these very extreme situations, and how we handle challenging situations. He told a story about, I think it was another ex-military guy, and they were on a different crucible, and they like had hit this stream or river that they couldn't cross. And one of the suggestions from the group was like, let's jump. Like, we'll just figure, like, let's go, like jump all in and we'll get across. No problem. But it was like kind of a scary situation. Like it was about to go down that path. And the guy was like, okay, can you guys just go walk down 100 yards that way and let us know
Check it
what you
out.
see.
Yeah.
And and they came back and they're like, holy crap. I can't remember what he called it, but it was basically like the stream, like it ended into like this deep hole, like abyss or whatever. Like it just, so had they jumped, they would have either drowned or got stuck, or, the water was freezing or wherever they're at. And he just was, was telling us the story and how this guy is probably how he was in extreme situations out in the battlefield or, in the war zone or whatever. It's like when there's shit going on and he's just like, okay, assess the situation here. And like, okay, I think we, and was just very calm, cool, and collected, and was able to practice that equanimity. And it was just neat perspectives. And I like being able to share stories that we hear about leadership and entrepreneurship and all sorts of stuff and how you develop people through those types of experiences of a hike or a crucible or, something like sports or whatever. Right. And being able to relate it with your team. And so I thought that was a neat way of explaining that.
Great use of the word equanimity there. I love that word. And it was a perfect time for it. And I think that's who we want to be, right? And it gets back to non-reaction, back to Viktor Frankl. Take in the information for this assessment. Now, we're not getting into paralysis analysis and dwelling on it, but a moment to take it all in. And just, you can imagine the way he did that. Because I've had leaders do it. I've had leaders do that. And immediately when they have that reaction, when you're ready to take action and make a move and solve the problem, and they're just like, okay, that there's a reason that they're pausing. And if they pause, the rest of the group will pause. And I loved that portion too, man. When that was right when he was talking about, or was about to transition to our adversity quotient, which I don't think I had heard before. As we all know, our intelligence quotient that we thought was super, the most important, our IQ, which sure, you need a certain amount of intelligence. I think it's overrated myself. And then we've heard of our emotional quotient, or EQ, how we're working with people and everything. But I love that concept, an adversity quotient. And because it's like that, hard times create strong people create good times create weak people create hard times. And that's that adversity quotient that I think it's just being tough, like being able to take it, maintain some gratitude, and just keep going. Like, and sometimes that is what we need. Like, especially in this modern society.
And he talked a lot about pace, right? And basically the pace of where you're going is that, he used the word grit, and it's your passion, your purpose, plus your determination, your will, plus your persistence and your stamina is what grit is. And so having that grit when you believe in something gets you through those adversity, whether it's your career or your family or your life or whatever. Like if you believe in yourself so much and wholeheartedly, and just knowing that you can get through anything. And a lot of it comes from the evidence of your past. Have you been able to do it before? If not, then start chipping away at it in smaller areas of your life. But if you have gone through some heavy stuff before and you're going through another piece of heavy stuff right now, you've done it before. You've got the evidence. Leverage that. Have the grit to continue pushing forward. Cultivating, what do you say? Cultivating true commitment versus mere compliance. Getting people
that was a bamboo banger.
That was, I mean, getting your team to move collectively on the mission. Like, yeah, you've shared the vision and the mission, but if they're only operating just to be compliant and, I'm doing what I'm told to do, that it's hard to move the needle in a direction that you want to go with strength and with grit. And so trying to leverage that commitment, that loyalty, that accountability, all of it without being asked is what you're really after. That's what you want. But yeah, I loved when he used the word grit. It's a great word, and it's a hard word to like. It's not used often enough, but when you hear it, it's just like, yeah, like let's go. And you just have this shell, a layer that protects you because you're going to get through it. You're going to figure it out, and you're going to do it with the ability to stop, think, okay, let me assess the situation. This is not a fire. This is just a situation. I'm going to think about what I've done in the past with the best of my ability, leverage that, but I'm not going to think about the results of the past. I'm going to figure out a way to make this better for everyone involved.
Angela Duckworth kind of gave grit made it more of a buzzword when that book took over the business world. But I agree. I think that's what you're looking for in teammates and employees and even leaders is things aren't going to go according to plan. And the only thing that gets you there is grit. If you're that fragile and a straw person that one little diversion of the plan, one punch in the mouth throws you off, you're going to be in trouble. Well, we're getting to the poner here, pretty close to the poner.
The point of no return.
And for listeners, I'm enunciating that is Poner, P-O-N-R, the point of no return. He told a story about how they were committed to this certain path on the obstacle, and someone had yelled, "We've reached the Poner," and he thought that they had said something else that you could probably gather. And just talking about the point of no return, don't ignore the warning signs when you're getting to a place where you can't turn back. We talked about some of those decisions that you make that are irreversible, and those are the ones that we're really trying to avoid. And we usually get a pretty good warning sign on them. So don't ignore your poners, everybody. That was one I wanted to make sure we worked in there.
Yeah, that was pretty funny. That was a good story. Yeah, he was awesome. That was a great session. Obviously, we eat that stuff up. Hopefully, we obviously got his contact info. We'll connect with him, try and get him as a guest on the pod because he's going to have a lot more great information that he can share personally. So hopefully, we can make that happen. But in the meantime, subscribe, follow us on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Music, or Apple Podcasts, wherever you jump on and listen to us. We really appreciate it. Keep the comments coming. We'll be back at you next week.
Low Bros out.